so everyone know who is who, and we'll let the conversation begin. So where should we start with? Should we just start away with Q and work our way down the line here?
Sure, yeah. I'm Q, let's go by Qasim. I'm the Director of Offensive Security here at Blue Bastion, and looking forward to working with you all in here, talking about the emergence of threats and how we have been trying to catch up to Blue Team, and Blue Team has been trying to catch up to us. Corey and I have this cat and mouse game going, or maybe a llama and alpaca game.
Nice. I like hearing that little competition going on.
Absolutely. Was this with some memes?
Absolutely. And Richard, how about yourself?
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Rich Liebscher, Senior Vice President of Corporate Development and Chief Information Officer for Eden Park Hospitality Group. So if you're not from Pittsburgh, we're almost 75-year-old hospitality company with commercial restaurants, Eden Park, our iconic brand, Hello Bistro, which is a fast casual brand, and the Porch restaurants. And then we have a division that does contract dining. So we're involved with higher education and commercial clients in 15 states, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, wow, and out in the Midwest. And so Blue Bastion and Ideal have been partners of ours. And this is obviously something for our clients as well as ourselves. We're very interested in sort of hopefully contributing and to the conversation. So glad to be here.
Excited to have you on the panel because, I mean, first off, Eden Park is iconic Pittsburgh. And then you think, yes, Eden Park needs top-end cybersecurity. And I heard something, the fact, isn't something like 1 in 3 people in Allegheny County eat at Eden Park over the course of a month or something crazy like that?
I think it's 99%, Jonathan.
That's what it is. Yes, 99%. Sorry for the little misrepresentation there.
We obviously have a strong affinity for all of Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania in general, especially with our Eden Park restaurants. And so, again, glad to be here and hopefully, share what we've learned partnering with some of the organizations in Pittsburgh that have done a great job helping us protect our guests as well as our clients.
Definitely. And from Ideal Integrations, we have Corey Bussard. Corey, what's up with you today?
Hey guys, I'm Corey, Vice President of Security Services. I deal on the blue side of the fence. So Q and Luke are always trying to play cat and mouse or alpaca and llama. I like that one more. I'm going to use that actually.
We're just going to have
about me is I have
alpaca. Yeah, we have to find who it is.
So I have alpacas, so that's a little fun fact, and that's where the alpaca llama comes from. But yeah, I've been in the cybersecurity industry for a while, started on the red side and then worked my way to the blue and haven't left the blue. So
all right. Very cool. How about Luke McOmie? Luke, what's going on?
Not much, Jonathan. Nice to see you again. And my name is Luke McOmie. I am the Vice President of Offensive Security here at Blue Bastion. I have worked exclusively in offensive security since 1994. So I'm an old guy.
Wow. Oh my God, dude, that's awesome.
But we, throughout my career, I have helped organizations with everything from basic assessment, penetration testing, compliance, governance. Really the focus over the last 10 years has been helping people integrate security into their enterprise in a more holistic and kind of wide-reaching approach versus going after, single type approach or single test type methodologies.
Fantastic.
Excited to be here today. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And our final panelist, I love the name of this guy, Jonathan Fasson. Fasson, welcome. And like I said, great name, man. Really do like it.
Excellent name, Jonathan. Appreciate it. I'm Jonathan Fasson. I'm Director of Technical Services here at Eden Park Hospitality Group. I work on Rich's team for this conversation, my team and I are responsible for the day-to-day security of for cybersecurity for Eden Park. So glad to be here. And again, Jonathan, great name. Thank you.
Excellent, man. Very cool. Now that we all know who is who, let's get the conversation started. I think the best way for us to jump into this is really, it's looking at what is the current picture of the landscape happening today. And if the way we can actually try to compare it to maybe like 10 years ago, which might be impossible, but it might give us some laughs as well too. So I don't know who wants to kind of take off and start off and approach the subject with us.
I can jump in from like kind of what we see from a professional services side. And really, one of the things that we've watched is organizations 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they really have this focus around making sure that they had the basics in place, right? Firewalling, some security awareness training, maybe they were conducting once a year type pen tests. Maybe even if they were fairly advanced, they were doing like their own internal vulnerability scanning, or they had other types of solutions like endpoint protection and things that, were helping detect things like viruses or other types of known things. In the switch that we've watched as the industry and as the attacks have matured and become more complex, we're finding that the layered approach is really one of the only ways that we're seeing success with customers, right? What I mean by that is really going and integrating security as a solution and a service throughout the business, so that you've got many different points of contact, many sets of eyes, and you always have a solid idea and an understanding of what's in your environment and what's going on inside of that environment. As easy as it is for me to say that, even if I stumbled over it, what we end up seeing when we go to a detection and a response perspective and doing offensive security to really kind of strengthen and harden your posture is that a lot of customers are still really struggling with the older mentality of kind of this iterative type testing versus it being something that's ongoing. And I think that that's going to be something that really we see a huge shift in over this year and over the oncoming years that we're looking down the pipe at, in order for customers to actually have proper protection and proper safety against these new complex approaches and modern attacks that we're seeing.
Interesting. Very interesting. And I love it because you bring this perspective from 1994. So you know exactly what you're talking about. I love it. I love it. Very cool. So Corey, what are your thoughts on this as well from your side of the fence?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're looking back across history, there's a couple things and a couple different ways to look at it, right? You could look at some of the compliances that are still in place that are, in my opinion, a bit antiquated, right? So there's a huge mark from, some people were sticking to these older style compliances that were in place, but so we need to transition and have more modern approaches for those types of things. But also there are things that are, have been screamed in the industry for a very long time. And you want to talk about things like OS hardening. I don't know how many times we've been in that conversation, how many times you hear that. On probably most security talks you hear OS hardening or hygiene, and we still haven't gotten there yet. Running a digital forensics and incident response team, I can't tell you how many times we've ran into an environment where they had awesome tool sets but zero hygiene, or zero tool sets and zero hygiene, right? So I'd say right. So from my perspective, what I'd say is there are definitely some areas that old transitioning to new, we need to solve for. We need to update. We need to modernize. There are some things that we still haven't solved for that are problems of our past.
Very interesting. And I'm curious from the Eaton Park side, this is someone like, as a business that's got to maintain security across everything you do. What's the current state now? And I'm sure so much has changed for you guys over the past 10 years, maybe even 10 years ago was maybe just a beginning thought to have some of the systems you would currently have in place today.
I'll start off, and I think Jonathan or the other Jonathan can comment a little bit. So, I think Luke and Corey just touched on it. It's dynamic, right? And so when you're talking 10 years ago or you're talking 10 minutes ago, what we're really looking for, I think, and how we approach it is to make sure that we have a number of advisors, some kind of an ecosystem of different partners, and they have different strengths. So, certain partners might be great at compliance, at policy. Others might be really good, like say Blue Bastion at sort of operational security. And things of that nature, and others at say even legal or insurance and protections like that. And so what you really are hoping for is folks who will challenge you but not walk into the room for a review every month with their hair on fire, that the world is coming apart. We really are looking to sort of always mature, always kind of look for what those vulnerabilities are. And then I think the biggest thing for us is once we sort of have that group of partners, getting them a little bit deeper into our business. And so that means things like higher education, that means things like commercial clients, it means things like what a point of sale system is, at least in our business. And so when you know those critical systems, assets, what our clients are potentially worried about, and you can speak to that, we can have a quicker conversation to kind of pivot when we need to. And so those changes become more fluid and easier to kind of adapt when we're kind of working with whether it's Blue Bastion or some of our other partners. So I don't know, Jonathan, if you have anything on our team, if you have anything to add from the technical side, kind of our platforms.
Yeah, and I think when 10 years ago we built our security around compliance and what was absolutely necessary to keep the business running, and the threats weren't out there as extensively as they are today. As we kind of matured our security program, we started going beyond just the compliance and looking at the actual business risks, and those have been growing, unfortunately, but we are also adding more resources to handle those emerging threats.
Interesting. One thing that I've noticed over the past maybe 10 years is back in the day, we'd write articles in our TEQ News magazine or have a guest stop on my radio show. And sometimes it was like, oh, it's this new firewall. You just install it and you're done. And those days I think are completely over. And it's an ecosystem, kind of like we have right here in front of us right now, where we have the vendors, we have the companies and the staff that are working for the companies. Everyone's kind of really working together. And they're also creating this really, hopefully, a strong culture of security across an organization. I'd love to know people's more thoughts around how this system works so much better when we have partners and vendors, everybody kind of coming together to do one thing, take the bad guys out, right? And make them look as bad as possible when you can. Who wants to jump in on that one?
I'll start with that in there. I mean, you mentioned the firewall in there, and you've got to think about who you're bringing in. And it no longer is, the security is no longer one specialty. It's no longer one thing you learn and you're really good at it, and it just one person can handle it. We still have organizations where you've got an IT person doing security, and we were talking to an organization recently, and they talked about if we get more than 15 help desk tickets, we are at that point at our capacity. How are you going to handle ransomware at that point? And we mentioned, for example, firewalls earlier. I was looking at some stats this morning, and we are seeing supply chain issues. You bring in a firewall hoping that would protect you. You don't even sometimes know where the chipsets in that firewall came from.
Interesting.
Right. In 2020 alone, there was about 78% increase in supply chain attacks compared to 2019. That's just 1 year. And if you think about the old back office days, I'm talking, late 90s, early 2000s, we had an average of maybe about 5 to 6 major 0 days per year. This is a Symantec report. And they're talking about today, an average number of major 0-day attacks or vulnerabilities identified is 22. That is more than 3 times increase in major 0 days found. So you have to bring in people, and it be internal hiring, it could be external vendors or external partners. We ourselves in Blue Bastion, we aren't just doing our own work. We are partnering with a lot of other organizations to learn what they are doing, sending people out to training every day. Because there is, in my opinion, and it's a pretty hard opinion, but in my opinion, there is just no way for one person, but even maybe one small team, to be able to do all of security, to protect everything. I don't know first thing about SCADA. Luke knows a lot about it. I don't know the first thing about malware development. We've got some team members that do it. You've got to have a group of advisors, a group of colleagues to help you with all that stuff.
Interesting, definitely. And so Corey, it's like your team is, you have a team assembled at Ideal that has a lot of these different parts kind of coming together to create a big section of this ecosystem, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple things going back a little bit more to like the vendor side of the fence, and kind of going off of what Q said about how we partner with other organizations. So there's a couple pieces there. One part is if you look at vendors very specifically, you brought up firewalls earlier. There used to be a mentality of set it and forget it. Today, that's gone, right? We need layers. I know that you've always heard from security folks, you need security in layers, but I would say, I would even challenge today, that's even more true than it's ever been, because if you have a firewall only, you're probably not in a good spot, right? So, but beyond that, you hear a lot of things, lots of marketing happening right now. You'll hear from a vendor, they're the best. You might hear from colleagues, they're the best. Well, one challenge that you're going to have is there's a ton of security platforms out there that you have to sift through. Do you have the people? Do you have the time? Do you have the expertise to understand those? So us as a vendor, that's one of the things that we make as a primary goal is we go out and we test these solutions so that we can find the best solutions for our customers. And that's a really key piece, right? Which is the best solutions for our customers, because it may be the best solution overall, it could be the best security tool. That doesn't mean it's the best for your organization. The other piece is to work with folks that are very, very, very honest. And that piece is something I can't highlight enough, because maybe we work with a great vendor, but that great vendor may not work for every organization, as I just said. So knowing the nuances and differences and deltas between each platform and piece, do you as an organization have the time to do that? Probably not. How are you going to go out and test all these vendor platforms and find the best products and understand the nuances and really understand them to the degree because you're deploying them, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is obviously working with an array of different knowledges, as Q kind of pointed out as well, right? So we have an array of different team members. I have previous law enforcement officers who are very, very excellent at forensics. We have previously incident responders who are now security engineers. We have these people that have all of this different previous experience in these positions. And why that's important is they challenge the status quo. And so for some organizations, that's not always possible to have all of these different perspectives and different things that are happening, right? So for me, I have almost 28, 30 people that roll up to me directly or indirectly that are all technical security folks. That's 30 different perspectives. That's 30 different backgrounds. Some organizations may only have 1 or 2 security people if they're lucky. So that's where you can kind of pull in, people like my team and give their honest feedback in their previous positions. What tool sets did they have? What did they dislike? What did they like? And so that's what I'd say to answer that.
Cool. You get to have a lot of fun then, man, having 30 of some of the smartest people in the world that are working with you. To do this. Great.
Well, the red team is also very smart, and the gentlemen we have from Eaton Park are also very smart. So I get to work with more than just 30 really smart people.
That's what I'm saying.
So I will say that it's more than just 30.
Especially when Luke starts hanging out with you, then it becomes a party at that point. So
right.
Luke, tell me, what are your thoughts on this? Because this gets me kind of fired up.
I think that Q and Corey both had key points that are very valid. I think that one of the biggest things that I see people struggle with, we do a lot of VCUSO advisory, where we go in and sit with people and kind of help them steer their larger security program and enterprise. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that people are making still is that they have this mentality that everything has to be done internal. And what we did a study a few months back when we were trying to help a customer really understand impact and weight and spend around their security budget. And what we discovered was that for the same cost of what it would have, of what they would have spent to bring in a senior level, not even an executive level, but a senior level technical resource to help kind of guide and steer some of the stuff that's going on inside of their organization, they would be paying more than they would if they leveraged a third-party partner who would come in with a program and a group of people, right?
Right.
So in the specific example we looked at, we were trying to teach the client to really get out of the mentality of working or seeking out a third-party assessor, a third-party pen test team or whatever, and to start looking at it more from a partnership perspective of I'm building a long-term ongoing relationship with a trusted provider, someone that I have a relationship with, someone who has the intimacy and knowledge of our business, understands our mission, our culture, the way that we function as a business from a day-to-day perspective. And in doing that, they now are spending the same budget that would have been for a single resource to now have this larger overarching program that's backed by half a dozen plus people who are security industry leads and professionals, so that when you're making decisions or when you're prioritizing things, there's some real teeth and weight and analysis behind it. You're not just going off of an industry accepted risk score, some CVSS score that says, oh, well, this is a critical, so this needs to be your top priority today. You need a partner that's actually going to be looking at your environment, the impact, the assets, the data that's potentially being exposed, and then make your decisions based upon that. So I would say that, you know, one of the things that a lot of businesses can do to really help mature themselves and really take that next steps is to find a trusted partner and to be open to that approach versus always feeling like you have to internally silo every ask or every need.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I'm sure Eaton Park can talk volumes on this. I'm sure Rich and Jonathan there can say this is exactly right. Because like, if they even wanted to hire someone, could they even find that person to do all that? I mean, she may not be out there anywhere. So the idea is like, no, let's put those resources towards the outside parties. What do you guys say?
I'm Jonathan can talk specifically to some of the experiences we've had, but I totally agree. I think the talent versus the technology kind of aspect of this conversation is huge. And so not only attracting talent in this space, but also retaining. And Jonathan, like your question, it's sort of like, you know, or going back to some of Luke's comments, when we're having these sort of like bake-offs between different vendors and different platforms, they're saying, okay, what we need to kind of up our game in a certain area, and that becomes a case where we do look at ease of administration. How quickly can we get this platform stood up? Has the vendor adapted over time? Not just the partners, but has this vendor kind of adapted? Because what we're hoping not to see is that we buy something 1 year and it's best in class, and in year two it's depreciated to the point where it doesn't even serve its purpose, and the pen testers are right through it, and they've worked around it and it hasn't adapted. And so there's risks in having a long term sort of approach to trying to acquire technology. But I will say that we probably had more success in partnering with a company like Blue Bastion and Ideal to acquire technology versus try to go the route of building our own team. We have a couple of really good people, more than a couple, but we have a good team, a deep team. But we also feel like it's going to be better for us to have this good ecosystem of both partners and technology. And so, Jonathan, I don't know if you have anything else to add specifically, but that's kind of been our approach.
Yeah, I think you know, one thing that we always have to emphasize is security is 24/7, 365 days a year, and it, you know, I lose sleep the Friday before a long weekend, you know, because it's you know, that's when the cyber attacks happen, right? That's when, you know, that ransomware's peaks, and it's for a reason, and that's because they're, you know, the bad guys are trying to catch you off guard. And to have a 24/7, 365 monitoring response team is it takes, I think, 8 full-time employees minimum, and that's just not a, you know, that's not a luxury every organization has. And so we reach out to folks like Blue Bastion and other partners to say, hey, we need these experts, we need this coverage, and I need someone calling my phone at 3 a.m. saying, hey, you got a problem. An email alert is not going to get me out of bed. You know, unfortunately, that's kind of the state we live in. So definitely, you have to understand that problem, and that it's a 24/7 coverage situation.
Most definitely. So let's switch gears a little bit and just talk a little bit more about some of the current states that are going on. We also have some examples we can bring up. You know, Q brought some cool slides with him to kind of walk through a current threat that's kind of going on. I'm just kind of, as we're now, like, you know, in 2023, like, what's kind of the state of, like, you know, audits and, you know, testing and everything like that, and equipment, anything out there that's kind of now the thing that people are really kind of wrapping their arms around to be as secure as they possibly can be.
I think that one of the big things right off the bat that is making a huge difference, right? We work with a lot of different companies that are in different stages of maturity with their security program. And one of the things that we're seeing where places are making huge traction is where they are integrating, and I realize I've touched on this a little before, but integrating the overall process and needs, requirements, the legal aspects that they have to be on top of, integrating all of those different things into a larger operational program. I think that traditionally we've seen a lot of people go and, you know, what industry they're in ends up driving what compliance requirement they have to meet. And for a lot of businesses, you know, it used to be, well, we once a year have this one audit and we go through, and it takes us 2 months to do all the paperwork and the interviews and this process. And in the end, we get this gap analysis, and it says, you know, where we've got areas that are strong or where we've got areas that we need to improve. again, the problem with that point in time type approach and by applying or following only, you know, one compliance standard or a accepted set of best practices is that it leaves an incredible amount of gaps. In modern technologies, when we're out there working with them, they don't have one compliance standard they have to meet, they have 12. And it becomes this situation where when you talk to them and we go, you know, what's the biggest headaches? It's not the fact that they've got, you know, if you combine all of them, 400 or 500 different security controls that have to be addressed each year in their compliance audits to meet these different requirements. The bigger challenge that we see is the audit fatigue that goes around it. The job has now become chasing the score. The job has now become chasing a checkbox to meet a specific legal requirement that's been defined. But when Q and I go in and we have these conversations, one of the first things that we remind them is that compliance is the legally minimum viable solution. It doesn't mean it's the best thing you should be doing. It doesn't mean it's the right thing that you should be doing. It doesn't even mean that it's the thing that you should be doing for your organization. It's that an industry standard has been defined to say, you have to meet at least this bare minimum to operate, or you can't continue on. And I think that we really need to strive as an industry and as individuals and as organizations to not make the minimum legally viable effort our goal, right? That should be a byproduct of us going after a larger, more integrated, more intelligent, customized solution that makes sense for our organization, for our customers, for our data. And I think that that's really where we're going to see a big step for a lot of organizations, is having to take that maturity jump from going from the once or twice a year, we're having a third party come in and do a pen test. 5 or 6 times a year, we're having to go through the same questions to answer all these different compliance standards. And in the end, if they can do this to where it becomes an integrated solution and becomes a part of a programmatic process within the business, the use of that time, the use of that effort, we have seen in the field time and time again, it makes a huge difference in the overall security posture and the overall impact that occurs when these businesses are compromised. So that would kind of be my big thought on that, is finding ways to integrate the asks, the needs, versus chasing the compliance checkbox.
I've never thought about that before, and that just makes so much sense. I think everyone's got to get their mind around that. And I mean, I just know for a fact that like when Corey's working with clients, they're not shooting for that minimal checkbox. I know they're trying to provide an overall solution, which is why they're partnering with like a Blue Bastion, because you guys are going to go and just crush it, right? So Corey, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how can we stop thinking about check boxes? Like, that's just scary to me that a company's just saying, as long as I get these things checked off, then we're good. And it's just like, no, like we're going to do better than that.
So wow, that's something I'm really opinionated on.
Okay, good. Tell us, what do you think, man? We want to know.
Well, it took a lot of maturity for me to not say how much I dislike compliance. No, so what a complicated one. So whenever it comes to compliance, as Luke really did a great job of pointing out, that's the minimum requirements. I think our approach since our inception has been, we're not here to make you compliant, we're here to help make you secure. And in our opinion, compliance should follow security, meaning that if we make you secure, you should be adhering to your security compliances. So that's been our approach, is let's talk about how we can help secure your environment first and foremost, and then we'll figure out the rest from there, right? We'll figure out does this fit into the mold of the compliances that you have to hit and achieve? I think that's probably the easiest way I could say it.
Definitely. I think Ideal might have a t-shirt that says no check boxes or something like that.
It's happening. It's happening. You just wrote it down. It's happening.
I'm telling you, man, I'll wear that t-shirt for you all day long. That's super cool. Awesome. And obviously, I mean, from Eaton Park standpoint, as a company, like you're being faced with these check boxes, but you're probably looking at this as more than like, we don't want just to check a box. We want to make sure that everything we do is just beyond secure. Am I right in thinking that, Jonathan?
Yes, I think, the goal is to be as secure as possible within the, the reasonableness of keeping business running. There's always a balance with that. And I think, I always say compliance is like car inspection, right? If your mechanic says your car just passed inspection, okay, it's drivable, but do do you trust it? Is it going to do what you need it to do for that entire year? That's, you don't want to, as Corey said, you don't want to live in that world, but you definitely want to make sure you're checking your boxes that you need to keep keep the compliance train running. Because again, saying, well, we know this is better to invest in, but if we do this, we can't check this box on the compliance sheet. Start with compliance, and if you're not in compliance, that's the first step, right? And maintaining that. Anything else beyond that's just it's good, but you're not exactly satisfying your goal.
Absolutely. Before we jump to Q and we start talking about some current threats, he was showing us some slides earlier that I'm like, I can't wait for people to see, because I think this is super important. As we're talking about these checking boxes and so forth, it brings me to the feeling that, like, we were told to check boxes on something like 10 or 15 years ago, and we put efforts towards some of that. Are we still trying to check some boxes that don't need to be checked anymore in a certain way? I'm just curious. I feel like sometimes, like, threats have evolved, the technology's evolved so much that maybe we're wasting a lot of energy living in 2005.
Probably.
Okay.
Probably true. I would say that they're all foundational, right? And so you do need to go through those processes and achieve compliance at the same time. If you take a risk approach and you look at all those boxes you need to check, they're all not equal, right? Some are very, very relevant to the threats and can truly help you and need to be emphasized, and others you're doing because they were, I think Corey brought it up 10 years ago, they were really important and there was something you need to do, and you probably still need to do them, but they may not be as effective as a control as they used to be. And so the standards organizations and don't always necessarily update them as quickly as the environment is being updated. And so I think that's just kind of the way we see it, is there's standards and controls that are just more important. So we try to emphasize those, but we have to go through that process for our clients and for our business partners, for sure. So.
Definitely. So I'm wondering if we're ready to bring up some slides for Q to talk
Sure.
about. When are you able to bring those slides up, Q, and kind of talk us through this? Because this is pretty interesting stuff.
Well, let me know when you all can see my screen.
We can see it, man.
Slides. Excellent. So this is really close to my heart, because we've been doing something similar for a long time. This vulnerability came out a few weeks ago, which allowed you to perform privilege escalation from any domain user who has an email account or can send an email to maybe a higher privilege user, or as an outsider sending an email in and trying to get some credentials. The really crazy thing about this, and this is as we talk about the evolution of attacks and evolution of having to defend against those attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And earlier we mentioned supply chain. When we really get into this vulnerability and understand it, it really brings in the whole pain point around how do you protect against attacks using a vendor's product that just make no sense. So in this case, the vulnerability was when you are setting an appointment with somebody, and Outlook reminds you that you have an appointment coming up, a meeting coming up in 5 minutes and 15 minutes. Some of us might ignore that all the time anyway, but you could set a custom reminder sound. You could tell Outlook, hey, I don't want you to play the ding that you generally play for everybody. I want you to set a custom one that's coming from my attacker control server. So that's what's happening in here. We are telling Outlook to use a reminder file from one of my servers at 172.27.94.50 or whatever IP address you may have. And it's coming over what's called the UNC path. A lot of you who are AD admins know about UNC paths. Those who don't, if you have a mapped drive on your PC for work, maybe a U drive, an H drive, those are generally coming off of a UNC path. And what happens is when Outlook plays that reminder, as I created this message, I send it over to somebody and invite. When Outlook played the reminder, I got this user's NTLM hash. Because when Outlook is trying to pull that audio file to play, my server is saying, hey, hold on. You want to access something off of my file share, authenticate with me first. So I get this hash that I can either relay as is, or I can crack. And thanks, Luke, for getting us Alienwares at work, because an Alienware can crack this hash, which is password guesses, at about 3 billion guesses per second. It's billion with a B.
That's crazy, man. Wow.
Yeah. So, and this is just a consumer grade laptop. But if you're talking about an organization that is worried about nation state threats, their threat actor has much more resources than just a gaming laptop. So this is how this vulnerability came about. We were able to use it for a few weeks before Microsoft patched it. But then there is a feature that exists in Outlook that marketing teams have been using for a long time that is not fixed, because if you really think about it, it's a function. It isn't a vulnerability. We attackers, though, are using it as a vulnerability. So in this case, this email, by the way, this was written by AI. So this
Even better yet.
What you're seeing in here is that tracking pixel on the bottom. I could have it be an actual image, just a dot, or in this case, I just went lazy and just did nothing in there. Just an image tag, because HTML emails exist. They are a thing. We still use them a lot. You all get spam emails or just happy emails that contain HTML. That image in the bottom is being pulled from one of my servers. And the moment this email is opened, or even in the Outlook preview, I get the same hash. So the way I've used this in the past is, hey, client point of contact, we're doing the pen test, and you said everything is in scope. So here is a status update for today's pen test. And in that status update, I have the tracking image. And again, same hash can be cracked at 3 billion hashes per second. So, or 3 billion password guesses per second. So the industry is trying to keep up. The attackers are finding newer and newer ways. And then you have massive amounts of software vendors and hardware vendors that are also trying to catch up. So you really have this three-dimensional chess being played. This, for example, it's pretty hard to defend against. This is not a vulnerability. This is not something that your AV is going to flag as an attack until maybe somebody uses those credentials.
Incredible, man. Thanks for bringing that up. Like I said, that you made that so like precise, and we can see this like, wow, that's why I guess Jonathan does not sleep at night when there's a 3-day weekend, because someone's going to use that as a way to get in. It's like, oh my God, which just goes back to my whole thing of ecosystem. It's the vendors, it is the providers, it is the everybody, the talent, everything kind of all coming together. So Q, you said AI generated that, which I think is pretty cool. What is the future of AI as a way to fight these types of attacks?
So that's an interesting question, because AI, a lot of defending tools do claim they have AI. They've claimed that for a long time, and Corey and I and others have often joked it's just a bunch of if statements. But what really, when I think about this, and I was looking at some stats earlier, 94% malware created via AI in like past year or so. 94%. So that's an increase in malware created via AI. I was just talking to one of our social engineer associates, Ross. A friend of mine sent me an audio. They did a pen test against their own company, and they used YouTube videos of the CEO to create a deep fake audio file of the CEO calling help desk to ask for a password reset.
Oh my God.
And it worked. It worked. Because you're getting an audio call in help desk, and we're talking about compliance earlier. Where's the checkbox for deepfake audio?
Oh my gosh. Wow. So you realize that Jonathan's not going to sleep for like 4 days before a long weekend now.
I think there need to be like ideal integrations of branded pillows. So I think defenders are also utilizing it quite a bit. You're learning a lot from, especially when I talk about some of the modern EDR vendors. They're using AI quite a bit for heuristics. We use a packer internally here, which basically encrypts our malware so it's not recognizable. And one of the EDR vendors has been subscribing to that GitHub repo, and every time there's a new change, that AI-based analysis tool is analyzing and creating new signatures. So defenders are doing their work; they're catching up. It's just got to keep going, right? It's
Exactly.
one gets ahead, another one catches up, and they get ahead.
The fight's never over, that's for sure. It's going to continue and continue. Just why I'm so glad we have conversations like this, because it brings it up. We talk about it, it gets us thinking. And I'm having so much fun with this. So I'm just curious, like Luke, your thoughts on AI kind of driving a bit of the future of, keeping us safe and how that might be deployed on the good side of things.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that's near and dear to my heart. I worked at an organization many years ago called Red Lambda. And at the time we were creating a product called Metagrid, and we had automated attack and defense type platforms and capabilities modules within the tool. The interesting thing that we learned through going through iterations, many iterations of internal testing, was that it is still, no matter how smart or how fast or how many cores you have or how many process per second you can do, it still always boils down to a cat and mouse game. And I think that a really great way, if people want to go out and do some Googling, there was a challenge many years ago hosted at the DEF CON security conference called the Cybercrime Challenge. And this was a large purse, could be won by different organizations that came in. But the purpose of the Cybercrime Challenge was to have supercomputing platforms that were looking for weaknesses, writing exploits, and attacking those weaknesses at the same time as defending themselves against other machines that were doing the same against them. There's some really cool screenshots, really great video that came from the competition. And again, this is years ago that they first did this. But even at that time, watching the iterations of a computer cycle through different processes of things that could potentially be exploitable or be something that could be hacked was remarkable. Not so much that the computer could do it, it was the speed at which the computer could do it. As a human, we rely on a lot of automated tools and a lot of different types of techniques to be able to help us fuzz and determine and find different types of vulnerabilities and weaknesses. But even after we find like an air condition and we go to write a custom exploit to do something, it's not guaranteed that it's going to work. And we could spend hours of time going through and doing testing, putting things together to then have it not be something that's functional in the end. With the way that a lot of these automated tools are going at this, and a lot of the things that we're seeing coming out of like nation state sponsored attack groups, it's way scarier. They've taken more of the martial arts approach where I will strike and then move. Doesn't matter if the strike lands, I'm already throwing another punch. And that's really what we're seeing out of a lot of these different types of attacks that are leveraging AI and automation, is that they're still at the mentality of we'll take, if we fire 1,000 cannonballs that are the size of, a pea, we could still take down an entire ship just as effectively as we could with one large shot, right? So it's that kind of that scattergun or that shotgun effect that we're seeing, where a lot of groups are having a lot of success in being able to go compromise and leverage these new approaches using machine learning, using artificial intelligence, using a lot of these different other resources that aren't necessarily new to our industry, but they're certainly now kind of at the forefront of what people are aware of and seeing.
Interesting. So in respect to time, we've got a few minutes left, and I always like to leave with some takeaways, and then we will take some questions from anyone in the audience. You can just put them in the Q&A and we will answer them. I always like to give people like a top tip or some sort of actionable takeaway. And Corey, I'm gonna call you out super fast just because you see stuff every single day. But what is like one of the one thing that any company out there just needs to be doing? So just the first step, whatever that is, or not do, that you've been seeing happening one way or the other.
Can I give two? I'll give two. How
You can give two. It's your show. Absolutely.
I would say asset tracking and management, because if you don't know what is in your network, you can't secure it. You can't even begin. So that would be the first place. And then basic hygiene, OS hardening, golden images, and things of that nature. That'd be the first two places. And people will probably scream at me for like DR backup. And I could dispute from here, but I'd say you can't secure what you don't know about. So the first place you need to have is good asset tracking, and then from there OS hardening, so that those are the OS hardening to me, and I won't elaborate on this too deep, but OS hardening is something you can take advantage without spending money on a vendor or spending money on a tool set typically, right? You can just go disable things that are built into the OS and you are now more secure. So it's an easy, quick, well, maybe not an easy, quick win, but it's a low cost, high value win is what I'd say.
That's like deactivating, like default having your camera come on your computer and things like that, right?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Exactly.
And so, Jonathan, what would you say is like the biggest thing people should be doing?
And this is getting a little bit in the weeds, but it's something we're learning over the past few years, is to really pay attention to the lows and mediums in the vulnerability scans and reports, especially with AI coming into play, because you can chain a couple of medium and low vulnerabilities together, and now all of a sudden it turns into a critical pretty fast. And can those little holes, as Luke said, those little peas can start to add up and really take you out. So
Interesting.
They say medium, but that's not necessarily true.
Absolutely. And how about you, Q? What's your final takeaway?
Training. Send your sysadmins, your network admins, your developers to training. Be it training on the technologies they're using or specifically security. How many of you know that Microsoft totally changed what Labs looks like? And if you have Labs deployed, well, Microsoft just released Windows Labs, which is going to sunset the old legacy Labs, and things work totally differently now. And you wouldn't know that if you weren't signed up for notifications and didn't have any trainings on this. And really, it's not expensive. You could start by a local B-Sides conference, BSIDES, B-Sides. There is B-Sides Pittsburgh, B-Sides Rochester, B-Sides New York. $20 tickets generally, $20, $25. Like, really great place to network, get to know some security professionals, and learn.
Definitely. Rich, what are your thoughts on this subject matter here?
Well, I think my key takeaway is kind of the first thing I started with, which is having a wide range of voices, people who challenge kind of the current state. And then I would say the second is just folks who don't necessarily essentially bring in just the problems and the latest sort of threats, but they come with solutions potentially. And so they're helping you to kind of mature. Because everyone can talk about what's going wrong, but the vendors who help kind of protect and remediate are the ones that we like to partner with.
Very cool. And of course, Luke,
I'm gonna sound like the boring executive. All the rest of these guys are telling you things about changes. I'm gonna tell you that the larger takeaway that I have, especially for those of you that are leading organizations, is budget by focus and prioritization. You talked about a statistic earlier today, $4.3 million to deal with the average incident.
Right. Yeah.
How embarrassing is it when we talk to all these different companies out there and they tell us that their security budget for the year is a $40,000 or $50,000 budget?
Exactly.
Your budget for protecting your environment should not be 1% of the cost of what it takes to recover.
Right.
I would say really a focus around prioritization of alignment with what's going on in your business. Really understanding, not just taking and accepting, to Q's point, or what Corey was talking about earlier, not getting lost in the industry accepted risk scores. Jonathan mentioned looking at the mediums and the lows as well. Really looking at it holistically, again, I think is really what can help businesses understand what are the changes and the things that we can address today that make the biggest impact and positive maturity change for our organization tomorrow.
Awesome stuff. Wow. I tell you what, you guys, this is like a super panel. I have learned so much today. I'm like, oh man, everyone's bringing something new in a different angle. I don't see any questions in the question box, but I have two fast questions to wrap this thing up with. First, when can I get my We Don't Check Boxes t-shirt? And second, when will there be a cyber smiley cookie? Just saying. For those of you who don't know Eden Park, their smiley cookies, pretty rad. Simple as that. Can't thank you guys enough for being part of this conversation. Truly informative. I love the expertise. So many smart minds. Love it.